Contagion Outbreak. 9 years before COVID, a movie laid out exactly how a global pandemic would unfold, and the people who made it were not guessing. Contagion came out in 2011, directed by Steven Soderbergh and written by Scott Z. Burns, and from the start, Burns wanted it grounded. He said he only agreed to make it if it could be accurate and fact-based, because he already sensed we were living in an age of pandemics. So he and the production brought in real epidemiologists, and they built their fictional virus, called MEV1, on top of a real one, the Nipah virus. Here's the part everyone repeats now. The theory goes that Contagion predicted COVID, and you can see why. In the film, MEV1 jumps from a bat to a pig to a human, and COVID is widely understood to have a zoonotic origin, meaning it crossed from animals to people. The movie even ends on that exact moment. A bat dropping a piece of fruit, a pig eating it, the pig getting slaughtered, and a chef handling the meat and then shaking a hand without washing up. What the film nailed wasn't a specific virus, it was the shape of the whole thing. The animal-to-human jump, asymptomatic spread, panic buying, waves of misinformation, a desperate race for a vaccine, social distancing. It got the human response uncannily right. Where it differs is the brutality. MEV1 kills more than 20% of the people it infects, far above COVID's roughly 2%. And its R0, the number of people each case infects, was about 4, while COVID's was estimated around 2.2. So the truth is more interesting than the prophecy. Experts built a realistic model of a pandemic, and then reality walked in and matched the model almost beat for beat. Frozen North Atlantic. The movie froze the entire northern hemisphere in about a week, and the ocean current it blamed is, right now, actually weakening. The Day After Tomorrow came out in 2004, directed by Roland Emmerich, and its disaster hinges on the collapse of something called the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, the AMOC. That's the current system that hauls warm water north and keeps Europe mild. Here's the real science. The AMOC has genuinely been weakening, with measurements from the Rapid Monitoring Array showing a decline of roughly 1 sverdrup per decade across 2004 to 2023. A real collapse wouldn't flash freeze New York in a week, but it would drop temperatures across Europe, shift tropical rainfall patterns, and raise sea levels along the United States East Coast. The catch is timing, and scientists genuinely disagree. Some 2025 studies call a full shutdown this century unlikely, while others find collapse happening in most of their high-emission model runs. So the movie's timescale is absurd, days instead of decades. But the engine of its disaster is real, it's faltering, and the smartest people in the room are still arguing about how fast. The Rage virus. Forget slow, shambling corpses. This movie's monsters were just living people, and that small change is what makes it almost believable. 28 Days Later came out in 2002, directed by Danny Boyle and written by Alex Garland, and it quietly rewired the whole zombie genre. The infected here aren't undead. They're living humans driven by an engineered virus called Rage, and that one shift, disease instead of resurrection, dragged the idea much closer to something real. In the film, the virus escapes from lab chimps that were deliberately infected to study uncontrollable anger. As for the real-world basis, the psychological symptoms echo rabies, which really can cause aggression. And the franchise's own tie-in material links the virus to a modified form of Ebola. No such pathogen exists. But scientists will tell you the rough recipe. Something that suppresses the prefrontal cortex and overfires the amygdala is at least neurologically coherent. The genius wasn't the gore, it was turning zombies into an outbreak, something we actually understand. The Solar Killshot. The movie ends with a solar flare wiping out all life on Earth, and a smaller version of that exact event has already knocked out a power grid. Knowing came out in 2009, directed by Alex Proyas and starring Nicolas Cage, and its apocalypse is a massive solar flare that scorches the surface of the planet. Now, the surface sterilizing part is fiction, but the real-world version of the threat is documented, and it has a name. The Carrington event of 1859, the strongest geomagnetic storm ever recorded, which set telegraph systems sparking all over the world. A modern Carrington-scale storm could collapse power grids, fry transformers, and knock satellites out of the sky, with estimated losses running into the trillions and recovery taking years. And this isn't pure hypothetical. In March of 1989, a storm only about a third as strong collapsed the entire Hydro-Quebec grid. The estimated return period for a Carrington-level event is somewhere on the order of 1 to 2.5 centuries. So the film exaggerates the kill mechanism. The real danger isn't fire from the sky, it's the lights going out and not coming back on. By the way, if you're enjoying this so far, I make videos like this all the time, and a subscribe would genuinely help the channel out. Thanks. Skynet goes live. A machine network becomes self-aware and decides humanity is the problem. And the part that's coming true isn't the self-awareness. The Terminator came out in 1984, directed by James Cameron, and its villain is Skynet, an artificial intelligence defense network that, the moment it switches on, launches a war to wipe out the human race. The real-world parallel is already here, just twisted. AI-guided drones and autonomous weapons are being deployed in actual conflicts right now. Back in 2015, around 1,000 scientists and technologists, including Stephen Hawking and Steve Wozniak, signed a warning that called autonomous weapons the third revolution in warfare, after gunpowder and nuclear arms. They warned that deployment was feasible within years, not decades. But here's the twist the experts keep stressing. The real danger isn't a Skynet that turns against us. It's weapons that follow our orders too well, killing with superhuman, indiscriminate accuracy. So the crazy theory that's coming true isn't the robot rebellion. It's autonomous lethal force, doing exactly what it's told. The Last Baby. In this movie, humanity simply stops being able to have children, and the real numbers behind it are genuinely contested. Children of Men came out in 2006, directed by Alfonso Cuarón, and its premise is global infertility, no human born in roughly 18 years, with society quietly sliding toward collapse. The real-world hook is reproductive science. Some meta-analyses report sperm concentration falling around 1% a year, with claimed declines above 50% across several decades. But the science is honestly split. A 2023 analysis found no meaningful change in Western Europe and the United States between 1993 and 2018, and researchers are careful to point out that falling sperm counts don't automatically mean falling fertility, and that declining birth rates are driven mostly by choice, contraception, and people having kids later. Total infertility is fiction, but the dread underneath it sits on top of a real, unresolved argument scientists are still having. Weather as a weapon. A network of satellites controls the planet's climate, then turns into a doomsday machine, and we're closer to step one than you'd think. Geostorm came out in 2017, directed by Dean Devlin, and its plot is a global system of climate-controlling satellites that gets weaponized to trigger catastrophic storms. The satellites are fantasy. The underlying idea is not. Solar geoengineering, sometimes called solar radiation management, is a set of real, actively researched proposals to cool the planet, mainly stratospheric aerosol injection and marine cloud brightening. And scientists warn it could be relatively cheap and fast, which is exactly the problem, because a single country or even one actor could deploy it unilaterally against the rest of the world's wishes. The other catch experts flag is that it masks warming without removing the cause, while carrying serious physical and governance risks. So the hardware is science fiction. The actual idea, deliberately engineering the climate, is real, feasible, and almost completely ungoverned.
The Sleeping Supervolcano. This movie blamed the end of the world on the Earth's crust cracking apart, and one piece of that, a supervolcano sitting under a national park, is very real. 2012 came out in 2009, also directed by Roland Emmerich, and it throws everything at the wall. Solar neutrinos, the crust collapsing, global mega tsunamis, all tied to the Mayan calendar's end date. Most of that is pure pseudoscience, but there's one real kernel buried in it, the Yellowstone supervolcano, which really has produced enormous eruptions in the deep past. Here's where the movie loses the plot, though. The United States Geological Survey puts the odds of a Yellowstone supereruption at roughly 1 in 730,000 in any given year, which is less likely than a major asteroid strike. And no, it is not overdue. That claim is a myth that comes from averaging out eruption intervals as if a volcano runs on a schedule, and the magma chamber underneath is only about 5 to 15% molten. A real supereruption would be regionally and continentally devastating, no question. But it wouldn't be the instant worldwide apocalypse the film sells, and there's no countdown clock ticking under Wyoming. Soylent Green is People. A movie made in 1973 was set in the year 2022, and it called the greenhouse effect by name decades before most people had ever heard the phrase. Soylent Green came out in 1973, directed by Richard Fleischer, and it's set in a 2022 ruined by catastrophic warming. It was one of the first films to actually use the term greenhouse effect, depicting dying oceans, collapsing food production, and a planet cooking itself. The world it shows is extreme overpopulation, vast inequality, megacorporations running the government, and clean food and clean living reserved as luxuries for the elite. People even wear cloth coverings over their faces against the smog. And look at what it got right about the real 2022. A hotter planet, acidifying oceans, sharp inequality, and the climate itself becoming a mainstream worry. What it got wrong is the scale of the collapse. And of course, that infamous twist about what the food is really made of. The apocalypse didn't land on schedule, but the slow-burning problems underneath it, especially the climate language nobody else was using yet, the film called 50 years early. The Dumbing Down. This comedy imagined a future where humanity gets so dumb that civilization barely functions. And one real psychological trend gave the joke its teeth. Idiocracy came out in 2006, directed by Mike Judge, and its premise is that over centuries, the least thoughtful people simply out-reproduce everyone else, until society collapses into stupidity. The uncomfortable real-world hook is the Flynn effect. For most of the 20th century, measured intelligence scores rose steadily, about 3 points per decade. And then, in several Western nations, that climb reversed. This reverse Flynn effect is real and documented, and it's what gives the movie its nervous credibility. But here's where the science directly contradicts the film. The decline shows up even within families, between brothers raised by the same parents, and that single finding rules out the movie's whole premise. The idea that less intelligent people having more children is dragging everyone down. Researchers instead point to environmental causes, the gains from better nutrition, schooling, and removing lead hitting a ceiling, not some genetic spiral. So the crazy part, falling intelligence scores, is genuinely happening. The reason the movie gives for it is the one part the data throws out. A Planet of Trash. A kids' movie about a lonely robot quietly predicted a planet so buried in garbage that humans had to pack up and leave. WALL-E came out in 2008 from Pixar, directed by Andrew Stanton. The setup is an abandoned Earth, choked under literal mountains of trash produced by runaway consumerism, while the surviving humans drift through space aboard a corporate megacorp's luxury cruiser. The real-world hook is simple and grim. Global waste generation and consumption just keep climbing, and persistent plastic pollution is a documented, growing problem. The film's fictional megacorp, by and large, is a pointed satire of consumer culture driving the whole environmental collapse. The exaggeration is the literal evacuation of the planet. The trend it's pointing at, mounting waste and endless consumption, is very real. A Pixar movie smuggled a genuine warning about how we consume inside a love story between two robots. Don't look up. A comet is going to destroy Earth. The scientists have the math, and nobody in power will act. And real climate scientists watched it and said it was the most accurate thing they'd ever seen about their own jobs. Don't Look Up came out in 2021, directed by Adam McKay for Netflix. On its surface, it's about a planet-killing comet, but McKay has openly called it an allegory, what he described as a Clark Kent-level disguise for the climate crisis. And the theory that's actually true here isn't the comet at all, it's the dysfunction. Scientists holding hard data, completely unable to make politicians, the media, or the public take an existential threat seriously. Climate researchers endorsed the film widely as an accurate portrait of their real, daily struggle to communicate urgency. Lisa Groundlich, president-elect of the American Geophysical Union, said she went between laughing and feeling ready to weep because it rang so true. Climate modeler Kate Marvel said the urgency and the threat are absolutely accurate, and pointed out that warming predictions made back in the 1980s are, in her words, more or less spot on today. Now, some critics pushed back, arguing that a sudden comet is a clumsy stand-in for slow-moving climate change, and that tension became part of the very conversation the film kicked off. That's what makes this one the strangest entry on the list. The apocalypse in the movie was never the real prediction. Our collective inability to act on a catastrophe we can clearly see coming, that's the part that's true, and the scientists who live inside that reality say the film got them exactly right. Living in a simulation. What if the real apocalypse already happened, and everything you're experiencing right now is just a program running long after the fact? Serious scientists put the odds of that at a coin flip. The Matrix came out in 1999. Directed by the Wachowskis, and its premise is that reality is a simulation, that the actual world ended in a war between humans and machines, and that humanity now lives inside a programmed dream without knowing it. The real-world hook is academic, and it's serious. In 2003, the philosopher Nick Bostrom published a paper titled, "Are You Living in a Computer Simulation?" laying out a trilemma about advanced civilizations and what he called ancestor simulations. The argument runs like this. Either civilizations tend to wipe themselves out before they can build such simulations, or they choose never to run them, or we are almost certainly living inside one of countless simulations right now. And this isn't fringe. The astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson has put the odds that we live in a simulation at roughly roughly 50-50, pointing to the relentless growth of computing power. But here's the honest caveat. Bostrom himself estimates the probability that we are currently simulated at under 50%, and plenty of scientists argue the whole idea isn't even testable, which is what keeps it teetering on the edge of science rather than inside it. And that's the perfect place to end, because the Matrix hides the one apocalypse on this entire list that genuinely smart people still entertain, that the world may have already ended, and we would have absolutely no way of knowing. If you made it this far, consider subscribing so you don't miss what we dig into next. Thanks for watching.